Hey, what's going on, folks? Hope you guys are all doing well. This is Waj over here. And for the past couple of days, I've been trying out the new generation gaming notebooks from Alienware, specifically the Alienware 15R2. This basically has brand new internal processor using the Skylake architecture, DDR4 memory, as well as a GTX 980M GPU. So we're going to go through the ringer, take a look at some performance results, and hopefully by the end of it, we'll determine if it's right for you. Now, in terms of the design of the Alienware laptops, that hasn't really changed much from the last couple of generations, and for good reason. I think this is a cool design that works for them, especially when it comes to thermal dynamics, and the fans are generally pretty quiet. Based on our testing, the upper portion of the laptop after about half an hour of gaming hovers in the mid 30 degrees Celsius, and at the armrest, it's nice and comfortable around the mid 20 degrees mark. Furthermore, when the fans are at full tilt, the fan noise is up to 40 decibels, but when you're just doing general day-to-day activities and even some light gaming, it's a pretty inaudible experience at around 33 decibels. One of the cool things about this design is how much customization options you have with the RGB lighting setup that you have. You have up to 10 programmable lighting zones with about 20 different color combinations to choose from, and you can basically set your favorite profiles and really customize the way that your lighting setup is going to look like to match with your peripherals or anything else. Now, since this is a full-on gaming computer, you have plenty of ports and connectivity options, a couple of different USB 3.0 ports, as well as a Type-C connector that's compatible with Thunderbolt 3, which is really cool. You also have a full-size HDMI connection at the back, and right next to that you have something called an Alienware graphics amplifier port, which connects to an external system that houses a desktop-grade graphics card. Therefore, you essentially have the power and capabilities of a full-on desktop gaming setup while still having a relatively portable gaming laptop. And the real compelling notion for first-time PC gamers is that they typically don't even need a desktop PC. All you need is potentially this laptop, a graphics amplifier, and a nice high-resolution monitor to get the most out of your gaming performance. And as you can see over here, we're going to have a dedicated video to show you guys on how all this works and it comes together as a standalone experience. Check out the description down below for more details. Now, moving on, the screen that we have over here is a 15-inch Full HD IPS panel. You can also get a 4K version of this laptop if you so desire, but I think a Full HD gaming experience makes more sense, certainly for the hardware, and it's going to definitely come at a better price point, but if you do want the 4K model, it is available to you. Now, the actual panel itself on this model is actually pretty decent. It's not the best IPS panel I've seen on a gaming grade laptop. The viewing angles are pretty decent straight on, but the luminosity and colors do shift a little bit at oblique and extreme angles, but you're never going to use the laptop at these vantage points anyways. Now, one great thing about this notebook is the audio quality is excellent. The speakers are certified by Klipsch, and the sound card is actually pretty good. It's using the Creative Sound Blaster Recon 3DI, and even at really high volumes, there's very little distortion, and you get a nice crystal clear sensation of all of the higher end frequencies, and a pretty decent bass response as well. Now, in terms of the expandability options, it's actually pretty good on this thing. If you take a look at underneath the laptop, you have access to the M.2 SSD drive, as well as the mechanical hard drive if you want to upgrade those two. This model specifically comes with a 256GB SSD and a 1TB mechanical hard drive, and you can also upgrade the 16GB of DDR4 memory over here, which is always a nice thing. Now, let's finally move on to some actual performance results. The first thing we're going to do is just test out the sequential speeds of the SSD we have over here, and it's not too bad. We get over 1.2 gigabytes per second in terms of a read, and the write performance is just over 300 megabytes a second. Now, the CPU specifically in here is the new Intel Core i7 6700K HQ. This is a 2.6 gigahertz quad-core chip that has hyper-threading enabled, so you have 8 threads in the OS. And in terms of its performance results, first starting with Geekbench, we're looking at about 3163 on the single-core score and about just over 12,000 points on the multi-core performance, so pretty darn good. The Cinebench R15 is not bad at around 655 points respectively. Now let's finally get into the good stuff, the performance results on the NVIDIA GTX 980M that we have over here. Of course, all of our benchmarks are going to be set to 1080p with maximum detail settings, but we're going to start with some synthetic benchmarks. First, we'll start with the good old-fashioned Heaven benchmark by Unigine at 1080p, no anti-aliasing, and at high detail settings, we get a score about 2390 and an average frames per second of 94.9 frames per second. Very, very respectable over here. And at the 3D Mark Firestrike 1.1, we get a solid score about 8329. So pretty decent, respectable results, especially for a gaming notebook. Now moving on to some actual gameplay results on Fallout 4, pretty much maxed out detail settings at Ultra. I got an average frames per second about 60.4. Rainbow Six Siege, which is the latest Rainbow Six game, is getting very impressive 80.2 frames per second at pretty much maxed out detail settings. Rise of the Tomb Raider at Ultra settings, we get 48.2 average frames per second. And a game that's fairly hard to run, which is The Witcher 3, especially at Ultra detail settings, we get 32 frames per second. But if you play that on high detail settings, you get in and around the 50 frames per second mark, which is definitely a little bit more playable. It's pretty hard to run this game at full at maximum settings. As well as GTA 5 on Ultra, we get 38 frames per second, but at high detail settings, you get a very solid 87.2 frames per second, which is definitely nice to see. Now, the final thing I tested, which is kind of irrelevant for a gaming notebook, is just battery life performance, but there's a decent sized battery in here, and for video playback and general use, it's actually pretty good. In terms of 1080p video playback on loop, I get a solid 7 hours, 42 minutes based on my battery test. I'm sure that performance results could go up with software updates and as the battery gets more and more broken into. But in terms of gaming on the battery, it's a little bit of a futile exercise. You're not going to really go beyond the 3-hour mark. Based on my personal test playing Fallout 4 with a full 100% charge, I basically ran out of juice at around 2 hours 34 minutes, which again is okay, but in most cases, if you're going to be gaming on this thing for a prolonged period of time, might as well be plugged in. But if you do want to game remotely without any power, you do have a couple of hours before you run out of juice. But really on that, guys, that's really it. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you liked it, please give us a thumbs up. Definitely let me know what you guys think of the Alienware 15R2. Based on the specs, performance results, and expandability options, there's definitely a lot of value here, and obviously there's a whole bunch of different models to choose from, whether you want 13, 15, or 17-inch display size, and you have a whole bunch of different internal combinations to choose from to better suit your price point and your specific gaming needs. So definitely check out the description for more details on all those things. But really, other than that, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for your support, and we'll see you later. Take care.